Hello, everyone! It's Twilight once more in the Wizard Study, and once more I am J. Herrera Kamen, your resident crazy author who likes to talk to the wall in this little corner of YouTube. Still sitting at a paltry 3 subscribers, but to all 3 of you, I love you. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Like, genuinely. Now, right now, I want to talk about Andor. Because I just finished watching season 2 of Andor, and I think that this show was exceptional. I think it was absolutely brilliant. To me, it felt like the team behind it wanted to do for Star Wars what shows like House of the Dragon or even a Game of Thrones did for the world of Ice and Fire. They wanted a show that had weight, gravitas, bravura, and overall a show that fell completely in line with the original Star Wars trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the movie Rogue One. And they pulled off a magic trick with Andor, seasons 1 and 2. Now, I'll start with 2 negatives. There are 2 things about the show Andor that I didn't like. The first thing I didn't like is the name, Andor. I think Disney Plus has a major problem with naming their Star Wars shows. I think probably the most interesting name they had was The Mandalorian. That's an intriguing name. That works. Then you have shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka, where the titles are just the names of these characters, and it's like, it's not good enough for me. The Book of Boba Fett at least tries to do something interesting with it, but it feels corporate. It feels like it feels kind of like whatever. Like a committee came up with that name. Maybe that's just me. Weirdly, the most interesting title for the Disney-era Star Wars shows was The Acolyte, which I did not enjoy. A lot of the Disney Star Wars shows, I feel, are just very cheaply made. I feel like they don't put a lot of care or love into them. Partially this is maybe centered around their use of the volume, that technology that's supposed to be like cutting edge, but in my opinion, it doesn't look as good as the prequel trilogy even does. I think the volume looks cheap and tacky and fake, and often it just makes it look like the actors are just standing in front of a green screen. And actually, the volume is more interesting than that, but I don't think it works ultimately for the final product. I think it's a cheap use of technology, and it shouldn't be, but somehow it manifested that way. Anyway, so then we have Andor. It's another show just with it's named after the main character, and I wonder if they could have come up with something a little more interesting or gripping for Andor. I wonder what if the show had been titled something more like Rebellion or something like that. I know there's already Star Wars Rebels, so that would kind of, I don't know if that would work. But anyway, that's my one complaint about the show Andor. The title of the show is not very gripping. You think about a show like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, The Expanse, Ash versus Evil Dead. All of these shows, they have very intriguing names. And then just to name your show after, the character in it. And the same thing is going to happen with the new, I think the next Star Wars movie is going to be called The Mandalorian and Grogu. It's just not very interesting to me. Anyway, so that's my first complaint about Andor. My second complaint is the music. To me, the music feels more like it comes from the Hans Zimmer remote control production school of music composing. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Hans Zimmer fanboy. I love Hans Zimmer. Particularly his score for the 3rd Pirates of the Caribbean movie, At World's End. My close friends have instructions that if I die before them to play Drink Up Me Hearties from the At World's End soundtrack at my funeral. And, I loved his score for Interstellar and Dune Part 2, those kinds of movies. But Hans Zimmer's music is very much based on... It has its roots in rock and roll music and pop music, whereas John Williams' music has its roots more in classical music, classical symphonic music, and blues and jazz. And so they're just very very distinct composers in terms of style. And I think for Star Wars, it's really important to lean toward the John Williams school of music composition. And Rogue One does this. It has music composed by Michael Giacchino. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name. And he apes John Williams' style for Star Wars. And it's a lesser version of Star Wars. It feels like a composer trying to recreate what John Williams so effortlessly did. But in my opinion, it really worked for Rogue One. And so in Andor, the musical choices are totally functional within the story itself. And they really do a lot of powerful work to sell the individual scenes they're in. But I do find that the show lacks that John Williams Star Wars feel, which, let's be honest, is a core component of Star Wars storytelling. Is that element or aspect or dimension to it that is brought in by John Williams' music. And with Andor, I felt that that was not present, and sometimes the musical choices took me out of the viewing experience just minimally. Still, I will say that the composer did a very good job. There are moments in that show where the music just really got to my heartstrings. It really tugged on them. So those are my only two complaints about the show, and they don't really tarnish my opinion of the show that much. Because, oh my god, Andor was just magical. It was wonderful. The characters on both sides are intelligent, crafty. There's so much intelligent scheming going on. It really feels like you're watching these characters play chess with these larger than life stakes. Season 2 of Andor is like this. It's like this race to the beginning of Rogue One, basically. And so it's basically split up into 4 arcs of 3 episodes each. Each one kind of separated by about a year within the world of the story. And the third arc, so episodes 7, 8, and 9 of Season 2 of Andor, that is some of the best television I've seen in a long time. Not that the following 3 episodes that conclude Season 2 were any worse, but I felt like I had an out-of-the-body experience watching episodes 7, 8, and 9 of Andor's second season. The place they take the show in those episodes, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but the place they take those episodes is haunting, mesmerizing, disturbing, rousing, powerful, and deeply, deeply tragic. And brought a tear to my eye, especially something that happens at the end of episode 9. Oh. So, Andor, a Star Wars show from Disney Plus, I think deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as the best seasons of Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. And I do not say this lightly, and I would not say this about any other Star Wars show produced under the Disney banner. But Andor, Season 1 and Season 2 are just flawless televised storytelling, in my opinion at least. And so I really dislike Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy, but I realized after finishing the second season of Andor that we actually got a proper trilogy from Disney, consisting of Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, and Rogue One. And you might call this the Rebellion trilogy, or the Cassian Andor trilogy, or the Rogue One trilogy, but either way, we have the prequel trilogy, the Rebellion trilogy, and the original trilogy for Star Wars. And what is so good about Andor is that it enhances everything. It enhances elements of Rogue One, it enhances elements of the original trilogy, and it enhances elements of the prequels. It commits to bridging the gap between the prequels and Rogue One in a way that clearly respects the Star Wars universe and Star Wars storytelling. So if you haven't watched Andor yet because you're skeptical of Disney Plus's ability to deliver on good Star Wars, trust me on this one, Andor is the real deal. So that's my little review of Andor. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. And remember that it's it's a slow burn. It's the kind of show that you really need to pay attention to. It's the kind of show where on the rewatch, you'll start to pick up more and more details that they very cleverly dropped in there. And beyond that, it's fun. It's really gripping and enthralling and fun, and it will bring you through so many different emotions. And by the end, you will feel like you went on a journey, a real proper journey. And as they say, if you pay attention, by the end of the story, you might be someone else entirely. And that's kind of how I feel with that final season of Andor. So check it out if you haven't yet. And if you are a Star Wars fan like me, definitely check Andor out. So that's my review of Andor. That's all I got for today. Thanks for stopping by and tuning in. And yeah, take care. I'll talk to you next time. Okay.